So they are trying to get back to where they were. Hopefully, that's the plan.
It's time to dissect all of the most difficult Umbrella Academy scenes to film, including, but not limited to, cornfield explosions, amputations, and 7 hours of blood-curdling screams.
Definitely takes some discipline, takes some hard work.
Number 1. The stars of this show tend to put their vocal cords through the ringer when filming intense scenes. In this example, we're talking about Aidan Gallagher, who plays Five, having to chop his literal arm off.
Five's arm needs to get cut off, but he needs to survive it, so we had to figure out a way of him applying a tourniquet with one hand.
Aidan lost his voice multiple times when filming this scene, and then again in post-production while doing recording replacement dialogue.
I blew my voice out quite a couple of times shooting that and also in ADR.
Number 2. You'd be surprised to learn that one of the most difficult things to shoot in season 3 was running on a treadmill. Tom Hopper, who plays Luther, had a less than great time getting into character on those things.
We look like we're old men like we've just broken our legs and we're just getting back into rehab.
And to make matters worse...
And actually, when we had to do these tighter shots, we had to pretend to run.
Number 3. This was by far one of the cast's least favorite scenes to film. It makes sense why it would be shot at the very end.
That was a very painful day. We all had to stare up into these bright lights and scream for pretty much 7 hours straight.
Some of the actors who didn't have to do the scene expressed just how grateful they were to be left out.
I have to say, I felt very fortunate that I was dead.
Yeah.
Some of them also expressed concern for their fellow co-stars.
Didn't have to do that.
I
saw
was
you guys
worried
doing
for a
it.
few of you a couple times. Because everyone would start to go blue in the face.
Number 4. Sometimes the outfit you've got to wear to work can make or break your entire day, especially if the entire thing is made out of leather and doesn't bend at the joints. The cast of Umbrella Academy had a super difficult time performing in these tight leather jumpsuits.
Oh, it was so tight.
No
You couldn't move.
spandex, just leather.
Not comfy.
Didn't bend in the knees or in the joints.
Number 5. Okay, obviously we loved watching this dance-off play out, but some of the less coordinated cast had quite a difficult time getting it down.
So who's the best dancer on the crew?
Definitely not this guy.
According to Elliot, the dance came a bit more naturally for Emmy Raver-Lampman and David Castañeda, but for him and the rest of the crew, rehearsal days were much longer. Jake Epstein shares how they even studied Kevin Bacon's moves for a little assistance.
They're like, get Kevin Bacon, get the screen. So we'd watch him and then try to imitate it.
Number 6. Who could forget this iconic season 2 moment? In the 3rd episode of the season, we get to see a great example of Vanya's powers as an entire cornfield is blown to bits. Fun fact, all of that corn was grown specifically for that scene. The thing that made it so difficult to shoot was just how unpredictable growing crops can be. In an interview with Slash Films, the director Steven Surgic talks about how stressed he was when visiting the cornfields 3 weeks before shooting, and the corn had just barely started growing. I was sick, he said. I didn't think it was going to be ready. But luckily, farming specialists stepped in and planted genetically manipulated seeds. 3 weeks later, the corn was much larger than they ever expected, and they had to relight the entire scene. Surgic told Comic Beats, "I was thinking the corn is going to get up to 3.5, 4 feet. Like very tall grass. No. We go there and it was 8 and 9 feet. It was insane. It was so high that it was dark inside when you walked through the rows." Number 7. Interestingly enough, Aidan Gallagher's most difficult scene was the first scene he ever shot for the pilot. No, not because of a wardrobe malfunction or losing his voice a dozen times, but because he was so nervous.
When I jumped forward and got stuck in the future, do you know what I found?
No.
Nothing.
In an interview with Looper, Aidan discussed the scene where Five talks to Vanya about the end of the world. As an actor, the first day of any production is the most stressful. It's the test to figure out and see if the chemistry works between the characters, and you can feel out what direction everybody is going in. Well, in our personal opinion, we'd say the chemistry is very apparent. Great job, Aidan. Number 8. We've got a lot going on in this season 2 episode. When 5 arrives in the 1960s, he sees his siblings fighting Soviet soldiers right before a massive nuclear blast hits the streets. This scene was actually supposed to be shot in one take, but due to how dangerous it ended up being, they couldn't even film it on the street. There were a ton of logistical issues while attempting to bring this sequence to life. In an interview with Before and Afters, Everett Burrell, the visual effects supervisor, explains, "We couldn't control the street for 4 or 5 days or 2 weeks solid to build and prep. So instead, we built a 360-degree blue screen on our backlot in Toronto. We called it the Blue Screen Playground." He also shared, "The sequence was one of the hardest, most complicated things I've ever done." Number 9. The action-packed and highly entertaining fight scene between Hazel and Cha-Cha might look effortless, but it actually took months of training.
I think they'll be surprised to see us doing hand-to-hand combat and shooting guns.
Cameron Britton, who plays Hazel, shared in an interview with Inverse some fun facts about working with Mary J. Blige. With Mary, we trained for a couple of days before we went in and shot it, and she had been training at 6 in the morning almost every day for months. She came ready to fight. Cameron really took a liking to fight scenes, especially one in particular that he says was the most difficult one to date. Number 10. Diego is definitely a force to be reckoned with, even for a seasoned fighter like Hazel. In his interview with Inverse, Cameron gives us a bit of insight into what it was like to film that scene with David Castañeda. David is so fast that my reactions are just trying to keep up with him. He explained how he was essentially just there for David to unload a barrage of punches.
Hazel, why are you here?
Well,
Diego, stop!
Number 11. At the end of season 2, there is a major face-off with the commission's agent on a farm, but something you may not know is that there was a major setback due to the weather conditions. In his interview with Before and Afters, Everett Burrell shares some insight on this snowy debacle. Half the scene was shot out on normal grass out in the field, and then it snowed, and it never stopped snowing. So for half the scene, we had to roto half the actors out and put in grass. And then the other half of the scene, we had to do the opposite. We had to put snow in for the reverse shots. Would you have ever guessed the snow wasn't part of the plan? Number 12. A fun fact we learned is that Elliot Page learned to play the violin specifically for the show. In an interview with Pop Buzz, Elliot shared that he can play a slightly decent Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, but that's about it. He even had to have a teacher on set, who he says was very patient with him. Apparently though, even with Elliot's Twinkle Twinkle Little Star knowledge, he still had to have a stand-in for the more complicated violin scenes. His stand-in was a 16-year-old prodigy named Imogen Sloss. The Umbrella Academy will never stop impressing us with complicated, intense, and beautiful sequences. It's clear how much heart and hard work goes into creating each season. What were you most surprised to find out about the show?